Welcome, students. This session is for BA Second Year English Literature, Paper Second, that is Prose and Fiction. In your prose, you have essays, and among them, you have an essay in Praise of Ignorance by Hilaire Belloc. Belloc was born on 27th July 1870 and he died 16th July 1953. Before we start with his essay, let's have a look at life and works of this author. Belloc was a French-born poet, historian, and essayist who was among the most versatile English writers of the first quarter of 20th century. So he wrote on variety of topics and things. He was poet, he was historian, and he was also an essayist. He is most remembered for his light verse, particularly for children, and for the lucidity and easy grace of his essays. So, when we are going to go through his essay in Praise of Ignorance, we are going to see that he writes so clearly, so plainly, and he is mostly remembered for his poetry as well as his writings for children. Belloc was educated at the Oratory School, Birmingham, and then worked as a journalist. So, this was his early life. After military service as a French citizen, he entered Balliol College, Oxford in 1894. He graduated with first class honors in history, was president of the Union Debating Society, the prolific author of more than 150 books. Belloc wrote on myriad subjects, from warfare to poetry to the many current topics of his day. So he has gone through so many positions, his being president of the Debating Society, and he has written more than 150 books, and that too on variety of subjects from warfare and poetry on many current topics of his day. He has been called one of the big four of Edwardian letters, along with H.G. Wells, George Bernard Shaw, and G.K. Chesterton, all of whom debated with each other into the 1930s. So, with these great names, G.K. Chesterton, Bernard Shaw, and G. Wells, he is also among these big four names of his times. Belloc was closely associated with Chesterton. These two were quite close friends, and Shaw coined the term Chester Belloc for their partnership. So they two were such close to each other that Bernard Shaw coined a common name for both of them, Chester Belloc. As an essayist, he was one of a small, admired, and dominant group with Chesterton, E.V. Lucas, and Robert Lynn of popular writers. Basically, Belloc loves to be remembered as a poet, and he has a very small group of admirers as an essayist, and he is regarded as admired as an essayist with these famous essay writers, Chesterton, Lucas, and Robert Lynn. Let's have a look at the text of this essay in Praise of Ignorance. I have pasted this text for you right from the book itself so that you have this facility of going through the text with your own eyes as we continue with this essay by Hilaire Belloc. He begins this essay by writing, Erasmus wrote in praise of folly. So he mentions Erasmus, who was a humanist of the Renaissance period, who was a Dutch, and he has written in praise of foolishness. I, coming exactly 400 years after, would like to write in praise of ignorance. So Belloc says that I am born right 400 years after Erasmus, and as he has written in praise of foolishness, he is interested in writing in praise of ignorance. I would like to write a little book about it, just as he did about folly. Erasmus wrote a whole book about foolishness. He says, I also want to write a little book about ignorance, but I am most unjustly handicapped. So, in a very modest way, Belloc says that I am not as an expert as Erasmus, and he feels himself handicapped. And the reason he gives is, in the first place, I can't write what I like because we are not free, as the men of Renaissance were free. The first reason that he gives of not writing a book on ignorance, because he feels that in comparison to the people of Renaissance age, these days they are not as free as them to write. In the second place, I haven't the talent. And in a very modest way, he says that I'm not as talented as Erasmus to write a whole book about ignorance. Still, I can at any rate write a little article in praise of ignorance, and so help me God, I will. So, with a touch of humor, he says that instead of writing a whole book on ignorance, he intends to write a little article in praise of ignorance, the essay that you have in your course. And he finally says that help me God to do this task. Remark the scope and amplitude of the affair. So once when we start thinking about ignorance, it's something which is huge. It has a huge area to cover. Let any man, however learned he may think himself, however varied his acquaintance with men, muck, money, and the printed word, set down a list of subjects on which he could competently deal. So he asks us as readers to make an experiment, because he says that any person who has too much of knowledge, no, doesn't matter, he has a lot of acquaintance with people, he knows about people, he knows about all the muck that is dirt of this world and money, and he has written, he must have read many books, like he says that he has knowledge about printed word. Ask that person, or even us as readers, to make a list of the subjects on which we can competently deal, that means on which we have knowledge. Then let him compare it with the vast and oceanic prospect of the things of which he knows nothing. And then he says, make one more list of the things that we do not know. And our ignorance, the list of the things that we don't know are oceanic, they are huge. There are so many things that we don't know in this world. Nor let any man be humbled by this comparison. Any person who boasts of his own intelligence and who boasts of his knowledge, let him compare this list of the things that he knows and of the things that he doesn't know. And any person, when he compares these two lists, is going to feel quite humbled. He is going to acknowledge that there are so many things that he does not know in this world. So all this boasting of knowledge is going to fizzle away. It is a great thing to possess true knowledge of one's own ignorance, for in a sense, you must have knowledge even to know the names of things which you do not know. Now, here he gives us a very interesting fact. He says that it's a good thing that one should know about one's own ignorance. To know about what we do not know actually requires a lot of knowledge, because there are so many things which we even don't know that we do not know. So even to know the names of those things that we don't know, we need some knowledge. For instance, and then he gives certain names and certain very difficult areas, from medicines, from other areas of science and humanities, that we have entirely no clue or very less knowledge about. So he says that, for instance, by pairs, metabolism and euxianism, isostatics and greater lymphatics, chronology and entomology, to say nothing of apology in the sense of arguments in defense of religious doctrine, or apology to a policeman, is every man's affair. Then he gives some difficult areas, and he says that when we read these words, we come to know that we have absolute no knowledge about these areas. And then he also, in a humorous manner, talks about apology, and he says that it is usually used. Apology is a sort of making a sorry in religious doctrines, to feel repented. And he says that, in a humorous touch, he says that apology to a policeman is every man's affair. Everybody are sorry to a policeman, because people keep on breaking rules, and asking a sorry to a policeman is a very common thing. And then he suggests that you may take a list of countries of which you know the name and the shape on the map, but of themselves, nothing at all. So in this list, when you are making about your own ignorance, if you even start from geography and you make a list of countries of which we know just the name of it, or we may also know the location of that country on the map, but what are these countries and what is their culture and about the people, and beyond name we know absolutely nothing about them, of towns, of persons, very great persons whose names are familiar to you, but beyond the name, nothing. So there are so many people, famous people from history, from politics, from other areas about whom we know nothing beyond their name. To go back to theologies, examine yourselves on genealogy, what the maiden names of Charles Magnus, four great grandmothers. So he gives us again some areas from theology, that is the study of God, and from genealogy, that is if we start thinking about our ancestors, and if we have the questions from the history like Charles Magnus' four great grandmothers, that is the grandmothers of Charles I. So, all these things from history, from our own life, from religion, there are so many things that we know nothing about. So, here we see that how Hilaire Belloc is giving us examples from all parts of knowledge, and somewhere by all these examples, we are able to realize that ignorance is oceanic, it's huge, and we have absolutely no clue about so many things around us. Who is the rightful king of England at the present moment? If, and here again, glorious ignorance intrudes. So if we start thinking even from the history, if we start thinking about those kings of England and who is the rightful king of England, there are so many areas from politics and from history that ignorance intrudes, it interferes, and we have absolute no clue about certain things. The supposed but doubtful will of Henry VIII still have force of law? So, such questions from the history, if the will of Henry VIII is still lawful, what were the claims of Spanish Infanta to the same throne of England at the end of 16th century, and who was the father of Zebedee's children? So these are these questions about which we haven't even heard, or even if we know certain things just by the name of it, we have no deeper knowledge about these things from the history or from mythology or these things. So this way, he with these questions, he gives us examples of our ignorance. And this way, he says that anyone could write down at top speed in half an hour more points of this kind of which he knew nothing than he could write down by laborious self examination in a whole day similar points on which he had some little knowledge. He says it requires a whole day and lot of self examination and lot of thinking on each everybody's part to write down or to make a list of those things about which he has some or little knowledge. But anyone can write at top speed about so many things, about so many questions, and about so many areas that he knows nothing about in just in half an hour. Welcome, students. This session is for BA second year English Literature, paper second, that is prose and fiction. In your prose, you have essays, and among them, you have an essay in Praise of Ignorance by Hilaire Belloc. Belloc was born on 27th July 1870 and he died 16th July 1953.